Welcome to this is a bit of a mouthful, I'm afraid. Redefining ICT, Adapting and Mitigating for Accelerating Climate Threats seminar, which is hosted by Hong Kong Green Finance Association and China Water Risk, together with venue sponsor Eaton Club. My name is Chen Chen. I'm the Secretary General for HKGFA, and I will be walking us through today's events. First, some quick housekeeping. For those of you after chasing those CPT hours, please make sure that you complete the survey at the end so that you can get your certificate of attendance. Also, if you wouldn't mind sort of putting your phones to silent or whatever mode you want to, that'd be great. Thank you very much. So for today's session, we are first going to start with a presentation from Deborah Tan, who is the head of China Water Risk, and that will be followed by a presentation by Dr. Dai Yongping. He is the Senior Advisor in the Strategy Department, Strategy Development Department for Tencent. After that presentation, there'll be an opportunity for some Q&A, and then we'll jump into the panel session, which will feature BNP Paribas, Bank of China, and Bank of America. And I have no doubt that you have plenty of questions, so please don't be shy. And for those online, please utilize the chat function in the Zoom app. So this event actually is a follow-up from our earlier sessions, which we've done with China Water Risk. And we did that with a small select group of banks. It was a sort of a closed-door session. So I'm actually really delighted that we can open this up to not just HKGFA members, but also non-members, because I think it's a subject matter which is very timely and topical. We are standing on the cusp of an enormous AI revolution, and the computing power and the amount of computing power, water and electricity needs to support that is going to be extensive. So, you know, it's great that we're doing this right now before that killer app lands. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that. I'll leave that to the CWR team. So what I'm going to do instead is a tiny bit of cheerleading for CWR. And what I want to say is that the team here is very, very unique. They really are subject matter experts on the issue of water risk and sea level rise. They're an authority, and what they say in the space really carries a lot of weight and authority. Deb here, together with Darisha, CT, Sophie out back, and Dawn over in Singapore, they are very skillful at finding a way to get their message across. And there's a lot actually we can all learn from that, because there's so much news out there. There's so, you know, everything's in the space is moving so quickly. We can really actually learn a lot from what they say and what they do. And I'll give you an example. They recently, I know we're here to talk about ICT today, but I think last week or the week before last, they launched their most recent report, which is an extension or continuation of their work on water risk and sea level rise. And a few years back, they did this incredible research on sea level rise and how it impacts a lot of Asian cities, and in particular, real assets, real property. What they've done this time is take another approach and look at what other assets or areas in which will be impacted, because actually the risk is the same. The challenge is the same, but actually they've found another way to look at this. So what they've done is they've looked at ports and the threat of sea level rise and climate change on ports. Particularly the ones which haven't sort of adapted for climate change. So beyond the challenges of, you know, getting late deliveries from your dry cargo, what the CWR team have very cleverly done is identify the risk for countries such as Japan and Korea, who import 90% of their oil. So in doing so, what they've done is they look at sea level rise, the impact of sea level rise on ports, port insecurity, which then leads to energy insecurity, and then ultimately sovereign risk. So again, taking the issue of sea level rise and something which they've been doing for years and have an extensive body of research and work on, find a new angle to hopefully address the problem and look at it in a different angle. So again, I encourage you to really sort of look at their report, and if you have the opportunity to please speak to Deborah and Darisha afterwards, as well as CT. When you do speak to them, there are two things I would like you to bear in mind. Firstly, is how to communicate that message. It is a challenge, as I said, to get your communication out there when there's so much going on. And from that, we can learn a lot from CWR. And the second thing which we need to think about, or when you do speak to them, you think about, is how do we stay optimistic in the face of pending doom and inaction and inactivity? And from that, we can learn a lot from Deborah herself. Deborah presents doom with a smile, intelligence, and elegance that very few people on this planet can do. So, I really encourage you to speak to her. I don't know how she does it. If you find out, please share with me. So, is that okay? So, no, hold on. Okay, this very one last thing I want to say. Firstly, I want to thank my team, HKGFA, to Jenny, to Phoebe, to Vivian, to Andrea, to Lewis, and of course to Channing. The incredible hard work they've done to put this together, and also all the work they've done this year. I want to thank CWR team, of course, for the opportunity to collaborate with you again. We, as an association, HKGFA, this is one of the many things that we do exceptionally well, and that's actually to bring the community together, have really good chats, have really explore ideas, and also at the same time have some fun, hence the drinks afterwards. Finally, I want to say thank you all to our members for joining us today. We can't do this without you. I want to also say to members, people online, members and non-members, and potential members, Hong Kong GFA is ultimately a platform. It's your platform. We are a better community because of all of you, and we are a more effective one because of your contributions. So with that, I will hand over to the amazing Deborah Tan.
Whoa, now I have to smile through my whole presentation and look very happy. Thanks for that, Tun, and thank you so much for organizing this HKGFA team, and also to my CWR team. You're awesome. Couldn't have done this without you. So today, I'm not going to repeat the title, but it is about redefining ICT. And it is a hot topic at the moment. But we do face power as well as water constraints. And the question here, I think that we're all here today is to sort of figure out how finance can really help us overcome this, right? So we write a lot of reports. We help people assess, strategize, and adapt to rising risks. And today I'm going to talk about these two reports here. We published this last year, and ICT running dry last month. We had a lot of press coverage in all sorts of tech magazines like, AI tech in Asia and so forth. But really, it's part of our accelerated threat series. And so we're writing these reports because water risks are accelerating. So the ICT Running Dry report, which we published this year, was the first of our two accelerated threat series so far, and the other one was called Crude Awakening. It's on the oil sector and the global oil trade. But why are we worried? It's doom and gloom. It's doom and gloom because we thought we were going to do this, but actually, and this was the projection to reach or to breach 1.5 degrees by 2027, but actually we are already here. So we breached, year-to-date warming breached 1.5 degrees in January 2024. And actually, just to sort of see how fast this has accelerated, in 2022, it was 1.15 degrees, 2023, 1.45, and April 2024, so the difference between January and April, we're already at 1.61, right? And so, yes, we are in an El Nino year, but you have to remember that 2022 was La Nina, right? So we are accelerating, and more risks means, more warming means more water risks, right? We're going to see more of this, that, and that, because we don't have enough water. So carbon is how we cause climate change. but water is how we feel climate change, right? So the worse climate change gets, or the higher, more we can't cut emissions, the higher the water risk, and we have to be ready for those. So how do we deal with these accelerating physical risks? But yet we're still emitting. So this is where we're kind of like heading, the current policy scenario, but actual emissions are actually going to 4 degrees. This is disastrous for the planet, right? We're going to need this emissions cut. That's about same size of emissions as these countries, which is about 25 gigatons, 24 to 25 gigatons. And that's a lot of heavy lifting to do, right? And yet the ICT sector is going to suck up more power. So, but also at the same time, we think that it could actually help us deliver rapid cuts, right? So we're going to need fast cuts, so 43% cuts by 2030, right? And we think that the ICT sector can actually give us this. Why? Because the ICT power sector is very power hungry. So it's kind of like on par with shipping, global shipping at the moment, which is the size or emissions of Japan and Germany. But actually, this could be the trajectory if not reined in, right? Because of generative AI, fintech, digital currencies, and so on and so forth. Internet's power hungry. So this is the amount of Google searches per day. That's equivalent to the emissions of Laos, which means 1 year of emissions are this, just on Google searches, which is the emissions of the UK and Nigeria. And if we add AI, this is all these countries. So that's UK, Nigeria, Germany, Saudi Arabia, and Indonesia. I'm good at flags. So basically, and the worst thing is that new reports are sort of saying that generative AI could actually increase the power use by 10x, because it depends what you use it for, right? To come up with a new picture, a new painting, you know, me when I'm like 80 years old, you know, or me with plastic surgery, blah, 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 right? Or with a unicorn. Horn. Anyway, in China, the ICT sector is not aligned at all. Because when you actually look at the other sectors, this is what it looks like. So that is green buildings, the power sector, industrial at China on average. And this is Greenpeace's trajectory for data centers, emissions from data centers. This was the revised data center emissions. And then these are China's own government-related research arm emissions. So you could sort of see, whilst everything is actually transitioning, ICT data center transmissions are actually going up, emissions are actually going up. And because of this, you know, you have to remember that although ICT is an enabler of climate solutions, it itself is carbon intensive and it's dirty. So China's data center emissions are ballooning. So this is the government projections to 2030. And just to give you an idea, that's the whole entire carbon emissions of the UK, right? And so here, clearly we can't allow these emissions to balloon, otherwise that's going to accelerate water risk of physical threats. And so we have to net zero these, right? So we actually think that these 5 Hong Kong companies, listed companies, can actually do this. Why? And we wrote about this in this report, and it's 70 pages of goodness. So please do check it out. Because yes, they're big. They're about 36% of China's ICT sector, and we're really, really pleased to sort of have Yongping from Tencent here today to explain, to also share Tencent's ICT transition journey as well. And they're really at the forefront of this, so very lucky to have him speak later. They're 22% of the Hang Seng Index, but more importantly, they're actually together have 87 million tons of carbon. This is 2.5 times Hong Kong's own emissions, right? So actually we could net zero Hong Kong 2.5 times over, and we could do this by 2030 because some of these guys have already got net zero targets by 2030, right? So awesome, right? We could actually do this. If you're interested, check out the report. But we also have another limiting factor that we have to resolve, and that's ICT water. So is China ICT water running dry? This is the report that we just wrote. It's free, so do access it, and you can find that online. You got to remember that generative AI is thirsty. So 50 Google searches about a conversation with ChatGPT, 50 Google searches, 1 person, 5 teaspoons. ChatGPT conversation, 0.5 liter of water, right? Not the same, or not on the same panel, in the same ballpark. So 100 million users means that will mean an Olympic-sized swimming pool used for 50 Google searches, but ChatGPT is this, right? So this is a big difference here. And so please don't have dumb conversations with ChatGPT. Right. Yeah, I can already think of it. Like, oh my God, I shouldn't have asked it that. Yeah, don't. Right. So 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools actually will provide water to 300 over 1,000 Singaporeans for a day. Right. So that is really quite a lot of water. And water use could explode because the ICT sector is exploding. So currently we estimate, because there are actually no numbers out there, we estimate China's data centers to actually use up about 1.3 billion meters cubed of water, which is equivalent to that, can provide about 26 million people based on Tianjin's household water use consumption. By 2030, it will explode to this number. If we're gonna include the AI, then whoa, we can provide water to 500 million people, right? So we have to find a solve for this. So this digital explosion means that we're going to have to manage ICT water use as well as green energy for the ICT sector. And actually, some of these technologies can be opposite to each other, or some energy efficient options could increase water use, and some could be beneficial for both. So you just need to be careful which we pick. But even without AI, water risk exposure of data centers is high. So this is a map of China depending on how much water you have per capita. So the red areas have less than 1,000 meters cubed, which is just slightly less than half a Olympic-sized swimming pool. So these are places which you would consider under the water poverty mark, right? And actually 46% of China's data center racks, of the 4.3 million racks, actually sit in these dry 10 provinces and regions. And just to give you an idea of how dry they are on a per capita basis, Jiangsu, 547 is similar to Iraq, right? And Shanghai is similar, it has got less water than Oman, yeah? So if you think about, I want to build a data center in Saudi Arabia, you would really think twice about it, right? You should be asking the same questions if you're going to be putting it in some of these highly water stressed zones. So rising ICT water demand, sorry, let me go back a bit. Oh, I'm going forward. And climate change will also give you amplified water risks ahead. So China's got this policy, so Eastern data and Western computing, so trying to move some of the data centers to the Western regions because the Western regions have better renewable sources. And this is the Eastern hubs and the Western regions. But when you sort of like look at all of this, and this is the spread of the data centers, data center racks, you can sort of see the water stress profile of each of these regions. And so 9 out of 14 of these regions actually have 40 to 100% of their areas face high to extremely high water stress. So that's the dark red and the bright red zones. And 72% of and this represents 72% of China's national racks. So you could sort of see that managing rising water risks in China could actually be a monumental challenge. Because it will actually end up competing for water with agriculture people and other industries as well. So I really urge you to look at this report, but since we're here on a green finance push, I want to sort of say why it's so great, right? Why there's so much opportunity here, because the renewable sourcing for those 5 companies that we're talking about was 7% at best when we did this report. I know Yongping, you're about to tell me that it's gone up for Tencent, but this is basically what the 5 Chinese companies are doing, but this is basically what the Facebooks, Amazon, Fang, Alphabet, what is it? Google and Netflix and Amazon is doing. So you could sort of see that we have a long way to go. And the fact that Fang can do it means that we can actually sort of like get there. It's doable in a short period of time, right? And actually, I just want to highlight that it's not just green finance, but there's also going to be carbon credit opportunities galore here. Because you kind of have favorable regulations going into this, because ICT sector is now a dual high sector for transition in China, with tighter targets for efficiency gains and so forth. And you could sort of see that you can't actually get to full net zero today without carbon credits. Oops. Right. And so therefore, there's a massive upside in actual transition finance, just not green finance. If you look at some of the latest bond issues, so we can sort of see this is Alibaba, Baidu, and Xiaomi, and this is some of the FANG bonds, so Alphabet, Amazon, and Apple. This was how much went towards renewables for this group. But that was how much went towards renewables. So it's a matter of like, many, many times X, right? So we should totally be pushing for finance to capture this upside by prioritizing ICT as a transition sector, because right now it's not a transition sector. Shipping is a transition sector. Cement is, steel is, and so on. And those are all very difficult to do. But we feel that because this is quite easy to do, and they actually also have the money, it's a positive growth sector that ICT should absolutely be prioritized as a transition sector across banks. And this is why we're collaborating with HKGFA. Who's been really, really awesome in driving this. So carbon cuts can be more, because we've just showed you these 5 companies, which is 22% of the list of the Hang Seng Index. We could have done these as well, but actually they don't even have a mention of carbon targets in any of their reports when we wrote this report. And then let's not also forget there's also all of those guys, right? So can you imagine the amount of carbon savings that these guys could actually deliver? And all these names are very, very investable, or at least more positive going forward. So the untapped China ICT giants actually provides a sizable private sector addition contribution to the net zero push. And we should absolutely tap this as bankers. So what are the next steps? 1, clearly we need to spread the word on this positiveness, this doomsday, but it's a positive doomsday. And we do need to do a reality check. So we have to stress test for these various different types of water risks, because they're accelerating, against various climate scenarios. And we have to align these water and transition strategies, because there's no time to sort of like have them unaligned at the moment, because you'll just suddenly see a water shock if you only think about transition. And number 3 is obviously no-brainers to put ICT as a transition sector. And obviously then to be a transition sector, we're going to have to create some taxonomy around this. And we need to also up the disclosure, because what we also found was that a lot of the emissions sat in scope 3, which is beyond the company's remit, but from an ICT company perspective. But if you are, say, us, and when we kind of use Amazon services or some other data services, they're considered scope 3, but they're not included in my disclosure. So currently, for a lot of companies, won't include ICT use as part of the disclosure, right? So, and every single company will use cloud services, computing services, data storage servers, and so forth. Those are currently not included in their carbon emissions scope 3 calculations. So how do we get that on board? So lots of things to do, and check these reports out again. And if you really, really then want to go full on advanced scope, you can check out this report, which is really about fast rising seas threatens seaborne oil and oil security. Basically, almost two thirds of global oil is shipped by sea. And we stress test at 15 ports that are the top 15 ports that ship oil around. And basically 12 of them are susceptible to 1 meter of sea level rise. So that could disrupt massive amounts of global oil trade. Anyway, time for a different story there. I'll hand over back to the ICT sector because my time's run out. So thank you.
Thanks, Deb. Now, I know I was right about when I said you're good at presenting stuff because I saw lots of people taking photos. And I even saw Darisha taking a photo, which is weird. Um, next up, we have Yongping. I think he's joining us remotely. So if you bear with us for a second.
Hi.
Hi, Yongping. Can you hear us?
Hi, I can hear you. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chen. Can I start now?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. First, I would like to thank organizer for giving me a chance to share a case study on Tencent after hearing the biggest pictures report from CWR, and this is a good occasion for us also to share with the audience. I'm impressed with number of participants online. So let's move to next page to start with a quick self-introduction on Tencent at a glance. While we're still, yeah. So in China, I hope globally, Tencent is known for its services to see with customers, WeChat. Everyone has an account, QQ, very popular among the youth. And also we have Tencent Meeting, Tencent Cloud, Tencent AI Lab. By the way, today Tencent has just launched its application, its own version of ChatGPT. We call it Tencent Yuanbao. I'm not sure how we translate it by now, but Tencent is a company, huge company listed in Hong Kong. Our net revenue, operating revenue is 27 billion, but overall the revenue is 86 billion US dollars last year. So we need to actually to make sure we deliver value for users, but technology also for good purposes. Next page. Shall we move to, yes. One, you have heard from CWR report about ICT sector. Now, what I'm going to share is a case of Tencent, how Tencent as an internet company would contribute to this carbon neutrality strategy, and a national strategy, how a company can contribute to that national strategy. Basically, there are two parts of this strategy. One is internal, meaning how Tencent would achieve carbon neutrality for our own operations. And then I will talk about how Tencent would contribute more broadly to the national target of carbon neutrality. So let's start with Tencent internal first. Next page, please. For that purpose, we have actually prepared a roadmap. Next page. A roadmap for achieving carbon neutrality. But the first question we had was, what is the Tencent total emission currently? Previous page, please. Yeah, if you see the previous page, yes, here, this page, you'll see in 2023, this is a fresh number we have published in last month. The total emission from company as a group, it was about 5.8 million tons of CO2 equivalent. It's like almost like emissions equivalent to one big coal-fired power plant. If you look at closer to this composition of these emissions, scope 1, that is the emission directly from Tencent, is less than 5%. And scope 2, that basically the purchase of electricity, indirect emissions from electricity consumption is about 44%. Then the rest of 51% is scope 3. But for us, we have decided that we'll achieve our carbon neutrality for all three components, three scopes. Next page, please. Yes, so our target is by 2030, we'll reach carbon neutrality for all our operations supply chain. That means scope 3 will achieve fully carbon neutrality by 2030. And to be precise, we will achieve 100% of renewable energy in the company by 2030. And as a reminder, as you know, the national target in the mainland China is to achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. So Tencent's own objective for our own operations would have this 30 years ahead of national target. And to achieve that target, is typically we'll start with energy efficiency in our data centers. We'll use renewable energy. We'll buy green electricity. And eventually by 2030, if there is still a gap for us to fill to achieve to achieve carbon neutrality, we would have to buy a carbon credit for sure. But that is the last resort. We are not doing that at this early stage. We're still focusing on energy efficiency of our data centers, also developing renewable energy, rooftop solar panels in data centers, and also we are buying green electricity, renewable energy from electricity market. Next page, please. Yeah. So in this page, you'll see, as I mentioned earlier, that we'll focus on energy efficiency of data centers and also energy efficiency of our headquarters in the building. And renewable energy procurement, we have bought as actually the first buyer of green electricity in the South grid 2 years ago. We also built rooftop solar or distributed renewable energy within the company's internet data centers. We will rely as a last resort. We'll buy carbon credit to offset whatever remaining by 2030 to achieve carbon neutrality. Next page, please. Yep. Next. So that's about internal. Now, how about the Tencent effort externally? I qualify this external strategy by 3 letters, CBS. Let's start with letter C. C is consumer, low carbon lifestyle. Will encourage low carbon lifestyle for all consumers. B as business will support digital technology transformation in companies, in industries, but their low carbon transition in industries. S as our support for sustainability. We call it here social sustainable value. Actually, we created a social sustainable value department to support this letter S. So we have CBS. Let me quickly go through these 3 letters, 3 components of a strategy, external strategy quickly. Letter C for consumers. Next page. Next and the next. Yeah, next page. Yeah, we know that in China currently we have so the per capita consumption is about 7 tons per person. There will be a lot of gains we can actually gather from individual effort. We have this. We have designed a carbon inclusive platform, actually its application, to capture how in daily life how every consumers, individuals can go for green lifestyle, and also at the same time capture exactly how much would be their carbon reduction by going through public transportation, by using secondhand appliances, and using bicycles and so on. So a lot of different daily activities can be captured in terms of converted into carbon reduction. And these individual carbon reductions can be then grouped as a package to be traded online, traded in the carbon market. Next page, please. I will go fast. Next page, please. Also, we can pass this page, and this is just one example. In Shenzhen, we use a carbon inclusive platform with the subway. Please, next page, please. Now with letter B, business, how we support companies. First, we have developed this Enerlink, Enertwin platforms to support energy companies, and this platform can be also used in other industries like cement, steel. We have this software. We can support digital transformation of industries. By doing this digital transformation, and these companies can achieve also carbon reduction because they have a higher efficiency in their operations. Next page, please. Next. This is we pass this very fast because this is an example of we are using the software I mentioned in Hangga's company. Actually, it's a Hong Kong-based company. Next S, sustainable social value. Actually, we believe that Tencent's role is to support new technologies. We designed and launched a Carbon X program last year, and this Carbon X program last year focused first year on CCUS, carbon capture, utilization, storage. And we support universities, we support startup companies, we support government, NGOs for their work in carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Next page, please. So next, yes, in this Carbon X program last year, we received over 300 applicants, and we selected top 30 as a finalist, and each of them received about $10,000 US dollars as prize, and then we further selected 10 projects and companies for bigger investment, and these are actually subject that might stay here right now in Beijing for launching some of these activities we have selected for under Carbon X program. And this Carbon X program will continue this year, and this year will open to the whole world. Of course, Hong Kong companies will be welcome to join, and we'll cover CCUS, maybe hydrogen, maybe energy storage this year, 2024. Next page, please. Next page. I will answer very quickly. The question has been raised also by CWR report, whether the data centers will actually a big consumer of electricity. That's very true. We have these numbers from International Energy Agency. We are fully aware of this pressure. I think this pressure of energy consumption and energy emissions is more on the internet companies. Next page, please. Next page. Of course, this I will not go to detail of this page. I will just show you that a lot of pressure on internet by using AI, there's a lot more electricity consumption. Again, IEA has shown that the energy consumption will double in next 2 years, just 2 years, and beyond by 2030 will be much higher number as shown by CWR report earlier. Next page, please. Next page. Next page, we skip this page. Or let's say also the AI application actually induce emissions to energy internet companies, but AI applications can help other companies, industry to improve their efficiency by using AI to improve their efficiency. I think it is a situation that maybe this is a time for ICT companies like us to look at the pressure, challenges, and also opportunities. Challenges is our own internal operations, how we'll deal with increasing emissions, increasing energy consumption, but at the same time, it's an opportunity for us to go for more business opportunities by using the Tencent Cloud software for industries to help them to reduce the emissions. So that's the conclusion of my presentation. I can have more question and answers if audience would have. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Yongping. Really appreciate you joining us from remotely. And actually, your last point was super interesting in the sense that how can we actually use AI to reduce our energy consumption? To people online, if you have any questions, please submit them to the on the chat function, and I'll open the floor up to any questions, please.
Some stunned looks, but no questions. Oh, phone, yep.
Can I ask you a question? Great, and thank you, Dr. J. So my question is very simple. The Deborah also showed the difference in terms of renewable energy adoption, right? The big difference between ICT in China compared to the ones in the US. Could you share a few practical challenge for you to adopt or move faster on the renewable energy adoption in this area?
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much for the question. Actually, that's a question my team, ourselves, discussing all the time. First, I must mention that from the time 2021, the number shown in CWR report, we started low for Tencent, 3% around for renewable energy, and today the percentage is now 12%, and we're going bigger share of renewable. So we are making progress by installing rooftop solar on our internet centers, and we're buying green electricity from electricity market, and that helps us to achieve 15% and going further, and we continue this way. So talking about challenges, I talk about the solar rooftop, and this rooftop today have been fully utilized. And once these are fully utilized, this represent about 3% of overall consumption. So there's a limit by using distributed solutions and rooftop solutions. And then we can buy more electricity, more green electricity. Then there is a question of how much the market can offer. Unlike other countries in China, we know that the percentage of coal-fired power plant plus other few natural gas and so on is about 60%. So by using this electricity, you by default you have these emissions from using the electricity from the grid. I think this is one constraint we have to face, and eventually to achieve carbon neutrality, we need to go for actually buying carbon credit, but that for later. There is a good news, and the electricity market in China is being undergoing reforms and changes. And one of these changes introduced is going to happen is so we can buy directly from west provinces, western provinces where they have abundant renewable energy. They have renewable energy plants, and that we can enter into a long-term supply contract, and through the grid, through accounting mechanism, we can increase much more our renewable energies. share of renewable energy. So to conclude, in order to increase our renewable energy share of renewable energy, we need to do our own effort first. We do everything we can with rooftop solar. We can buy as much as possible. We enter into a long-term contract with renewable energy power plants. But on the other hand, we also hope that the electricity sector and the policy side would help us to achieve that objective. And we're counting on the market reform positive changes.
Thank you for that. Actually, Yongping, I also have a question for you. I wanted to sort of ask you, when you did your when you created your generative AI chatbot, did you sort of see an increase in water use and also obviously power through that time? If you could talk about that or share that, that would be awesome. At the most important time. Technical failure at the most important time. Okay, we will have to wait with bated breath for this answer. Does anybody else have a question for me in the meantime?
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. Okay, yes, we can hear you. Yeah, please continue.
Okay, so I'm sorry. There is a external phone calling. So significant increase in electricity consumption in last year, 2023. But we more bigger, because 2023 we had about 2% of increase compared to previous year. So not significant. But what and it's related consumption, it's more about considering the experience of other companies. When you have AI, you have electricity consumption, but you have to build more internet data centers. And these internet data centers, when you buy these servers and build the building and so on, these scope 3 emissions will increase actually faster than the electricity consumption. And the electricity consumption, you can still offset by many ways of what I'm talking about. But if you build more internet data centers, it will be difficult to achieve the carbon neutrality, because these are cement, these are steel. So that part is not actually taken care very clearly. Electricity side, I'm less worried. I think by the effort we're doing, we will still achieve carbon neutrality by 2030. But scope 3, if we build more internet data centers, so not just Tencent, it's global. In US, you will see that part is a worry for me. And on the question of water, honestly, this not being fully captured in the current, in our current way of doing this, our own report, our own accounting. Perhaps this not been a big issue yet, but we appreciate these advices, recommendations in CWR report. We should actually, from now on, to have a closer look on the water consumption.
Thank you for that, Yongping. I actually have a question from online, and I noticed that we also have one question here, and I also noticed that we're running out of time, so we'll just do these two questions. So I think to a certain extent, I'm going to read the question from online first. Okay, great presentations and super informative. Dr. Tsai mentioned ways to use AI to reduce energy consumption, whilst Deborah mentioned generative AI drove material water consumption. So how can companies strike this delicate balance between the two? Go first.
Actually, I answered partly that question
earlier. I think you did already.
But I will think that based on this recommendation from CWR report, from Deborah's presentation, we should take a closer look on water consumption, particularly on the location of the future ICT internet data centers, because that would increase a lot more emissions because of the reason I mentioned, because the water consumption, but also cement, building embedded emissions in there.
Absolutely. I think it's, with water risk, it's all about location. You can actually manage it.
Yes, yes.
So it's picking the right location. And also you can use less water if the area is also naturally colder, right? So you need less cooling for water. Also, there's new technologies now that actually can sort of like help balance the two. But there's always been a conundrum, I think, and trade-offs in this water, energy, climate nexus. We just have to sort of like find a way forward. But whatever it is, we do need to cut carbon. So we do need AI. So it's not like we can do without it. It does actually help other processes cut emissions. But we just need to be wary that it could cause water risks. Sorry, last question.
Fully agree. Thank you.
Yeah. So obviously there's a really insatiable growth and demand from AI, and it's not going to be able to constrain that. I'm not sure that there'll be a equivalent growth in supply of renewables to keep up with that. So where does this kind of crash, right? So, I mean, you mentioned water regulation imminently, but I mean, you're not going to constrain this, right? So what do you think on that, Deborah?
Yeah, I think that, it's not just an issue in China, right? We're going to sort of like face issues where like say, for example, in the US, there's going to be great demand on the grid as well. You have a grand convergence of themes, right? You have rising use of electric vehicles demanding more power from the grid. And then you have this confluence of like huge demand for AI and so forth. And so, the grid needs to be upgraded, number one. And if you're not, and mostly grid investment has kind of like lagged behind. So we will see power being a limit to this. And I think, from a water perspective, I think we'll see power being a limit to AI expansion before we see water being a limit to this, right? So that's personal opinion. But this doesn't mean that, and also in Asia, we are sort of seeing some of the builds in ASEAN data centers probably take out some of the excess capacity in coal. So that's kind of like stymied some of the early retirement schemes and so forth. Anyway, I'll leave it to the panel discussion because I've got zero time flashing at me. And let's move on to the panel discussion, and which I think is going to be really, really interesting to sort of see how finance is also tackling these issues, because, it is a hard stop with power and water.
Thank you, Yongping, and thank you, Deborah.
Thank you, Yongping.
Now, moving quickly on to the next panel session, I'd like to.
Sorry, we did bring some, for those old school people, we do have some hard copies of the two reports I was talking about. So can you see CT over there? And I have a couple of reports over here. Everybody else can, sorry, those online, you can grab them on the internet. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, thanks, Steph. I'd like to invite to the stage first our moderator, Darisha Morendo, lead finance engagement and water risk evaluation of CWR. And then the panelists will be Ms. Channy Huang, Managing Director and Head of Sustainable Markets, APAC BNP Paribas, as well as the Executive Vice President of HKGFA. And also, may I say, the recent winner of the Award for Excellence in Sustainability at the Women in Finance Awards. Okay, we'll do it by seating. So Mr. Fei Lau, Senior Vice President, Sustainability Strategy, Bank of China, excuse me. And finally, last but not least, Ms. Feng Chang, Managing Director, Head of APAC Sustainable Finance Advisory, Bank of America.
Thank you. Okay, great. It's lovely to be here. Thank you, everyone, for turning up on a day in Hong Kong where I think there's going to be a storm later on. So thank you for all coming in person. And I think there are quite a few people joining us online as well. Deborah and Yongping, thank you for great presentations and lots for us to think about. And thank you for amazing introduction to CWR. Geez, that was very complimentary. So today we have three awesome speakers here who are all going to talk about slightly different perspectives on what they're doing in the ICT sector. But clearly, ICT is growing like crazy right now, especially when we think about AI. But as Deborah mentioned, as Yongpin mentioned as well, could power and water actually be a constraint for this growth? And when we come to water, it's actually becoming more of a hot topic. We're actually working with a large global tech player who's looking at water neutrality as well. On the transition side, there are quite a few things happening, and Yongpin mentioned that. But I think there's a lot that the financial sector can do to help here. So I'm going to start with just the three of you. If you could just give a quick introductions to yourselves and how you are working with the ICT sector on transition. And if there's anything on the water side that you're doing, if you can add that as well. But I know that's a bit difficult.
I think maybe I'll start in the order of the panel. So I head up our APAC, BNP Paribas APAC Sustainable Finance. So we do work with a wide range of companies and sovereigns and investors and agencies to help them in terms of sustainable financing, as well as, investing, depending which side of the, table you sit, right? Related to the ICT sector, we actually have been fairly engaging with some of the leading players in your report in their financing, because that sector to us is actually a very attractive sector. Like, you guys mentioned, it's a fast growing industry. There's a lot of technological breakthrough that is actually very attractive, from an alpha perspective. At the same time, it's also very attractive from beta perspective, because these are very large scale, well-established business with huge operations around the world that is affecting everybody's day-to-day in life at work, right? We're so digitalized in every aspect. So for us, from a risk perspective, we have a very strong credit risk appetite for this sector. So I think you definitely have everything's lined up in terms of opportunity, in terms of risk. So it's a perfect, candidate, for banks like us. I'm sure it's similar to our peers on this panel, right? So being very active with this sector in terms of how looking at their decarbonization as well as their sustainability trajectory and ambition, and how we can play a role in their journey. So we've been actually working with a lot of leading players, including Lenovo in their debut green bond as their sole green advisor. We have worked on sustainability linked loans with Ant. We have worked on green loans with Alibaba, some of the very familiar household names that you can think of, right? So this is, some of the work that we have done in the industry. And we realize that, financing is a really key part, to the whole journey, because with all net zero, all these renewable energy target, we requires huge capex to finance. And these are very bankable capex, for us to look at compared to more challenging sector like agriculture, right? So I think, for banks like us, we are hugely invested, in this area.
Okay, thanks. And also thanks for the organizer for inviting me to here. I'm Fei Lau from Bank of China, Hong Kong. I'm currently heading the team of sustainability strategy in the bank. So what we do day to day is to think of or set out the frame and the strategy for our banks to pursue on our low carbon transition. So actually two things we are doing. The first thing is like, because BOCHK, we always talk about going hands in hands with our customers on the low carbon transition journey. So we talk to our customers to see how they can actually go low carbon. And I think maybe we are not really just the ICT part, but also for all our customers that they are doing their own transition. Maybe somehow their projects will involve ICT as well. We also so I'm not echoing, I'm echoing Chinese or everything's, but I'm not going to talk too much on it because she'll talk most of the thing I want to talk. But on the second hand, I find myself a weird person on this stage, because we are also on the operations side. Because as a local bank, we actually operate our own data center in Hong Kong, and this is the places that are more headache for us. And I absolutely share what Yongping has said. We have seen an uprising or rising trend for electricity use for our data center. because of our digitalizations, and we are struggling to see if we can buy any kind of green and renewables energy, because there's always a lack of supply in Hong Kong, and how we can actually tackle this. And this is within our biggest problem, because BOCHK actually committed to be carbon neutrality in 2030 for our own operations, and this definitely hit us on reaching the target. So this is something that we are always in our mind. So I'm a bit on both the financer and the supporter of the transition as always. As well, we are on our own operation. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you very much for having me. And my name is Fan Chang. I'm leading the sustainable finance business in Asia for Bank of America. I think it's pretty hard to be the last speaker to comment on this one, because Chao Ni and Fei really summarized well. And then I do actually see the convergence for all of the banks in terms of the strategy in engaging the clients. So now we're the similar one in 2021. We have made a net zero commitment by 2050. As the financial institutions, you do know, big part of our GHG emission is really in the scope 3 in the finance, the emission. So the only way for us to get there is trying to support our clients and to get to the net zero. That do actually make all of our work quite interesting. We talk to the clients, we understand their transition strategy. We understand what type of technology is relevant for them. I think that's the very good news for the ICT sectors. Technologies are actually there. And then we're trying to understand how much the CAPEX they actually plan to deploy in these technologies, and then it is our role to help them to raise this capital or acquire that technologies. So on that front, we are very actively working with the ICT sector. So in addition to this client engagement, and my team is also looking at the sustainable finance project, project financing. So which means we directly deployed the capital in the renewable energy, solar, wind, energy storage and the carbon market, and all of this is actually has been mentioned by the two speakers, right? Those are the key levers this sectors are looking at. They're playing a very active role, either on the off-taking side, or they actually directly invest in the projects themselves. So all of this together, and then I would say we work very closely with them.
Thank you. I'm going to start with Charni, mainly because you were one of our first supporters when we published the ICT transition report. You hosted an event in September itself. And that was, I think, 2 weeks after we published the report. What was the feedback you got actually from your clients and internally as well from the findings? Because I don't think we had really talked about ICT transition before that.
Yeah, we have the privilege to take the findings, and really, I just cannot wait to showcase that in front of our clients, right? Because the finding, I think, it is fairly shocking, and at the same time, actually very important to factor into finance and investment. So I think after the event, I felt there's definitely a sense of surprise, a sense of complexity, and a sense of urgency. And actually very similar to the reaction that we got from the audience today after, Deborah's presentation and Dr. Chai's presentation, right? So when it comes to surprise, I think ICT, in terms of emission and water, consumption, is very much under the radar. You don't really associate it with high emitter like fossil fuel, utility, and steel, cement, so on and so forth, right? So I mean, if you look at China's data center, by 2030, it's going to emit 340 million tons of carbon emission, which is equivalent to the energy sector of the UK. So I think that kind of finding is extremely shocking and surprise to a lot of investors that we brought to the event in September. And a lot of people actually did not know that China is now classifying the ICT sector as a dual high sector. So China's going to regulate ICT the same, in the same manner they will regulate steel and cement. Right? So how, as investors or capital providers, how do you reflect that kind of regulation risk when you analyze sector. So that's something very new. And in terms of complexity, Dr. Zhai shares some of the levers that they would deploy to decarbonize, their entire ecosystem, the supply chain, right, 1, 2, and 3. So that it comes with a lot of complexity. So how do you find winners and losers, in the game? That's going to be a new thing for investors to look at. But at the same time, the complexity also comes in because technology, the ICT players are also enablers, because as we digitalize our life and work, it also leads to a lot of energy efficiency gain and carbon reduction as well. So that's something definitely worth keeping in mind. And finally, is the sense of urgency, right? There's so much, we really need to do something about it in the way we finance and invest in this sector. So I think that was actually a lot of key takeaways for our clients through the first event that we hosted.
And Feng, and I think China, you can jump in here as well. You're speaking to your clients, a lot of ICT corporates or other corporates as well, on their decarbonization. Is there some pushback sometimes from them when you're having these conversations, especially from ICT players, or is the conversation progressing how you would like it to progress?
So no, I think that's also a question I asked them to Dr. Zhai, right? How come in the renewable energy in the percentage and the adoption isn't so low? So when there is a pushback, it's always important for us to understand the reason. When you actually see the shocking graph, right, in the US, it's getting to the 100%, but how come in Asia it's only so low? And they're doing a lot. They made renewable energy in the 100% of the target. And the simple reason, right? The market, it doesn't even have this corporate PPA. In the US, the Google, Amazon, all of these companies, they're doing a lot in addition to setting the on-site renewable energy, which, by the way, you only have that much of a rooftop, right? You can use. And then what you really do is you go purchase the power directly from the power producer. That is probably not available for a lot of countries operate. So that ratio is low. It's important for us to understand the reason of pushback and then find the solution. So it's great to hear that China is currently having this electricity reform will allow the corporate to purchase, and that will be a huge of a push even for the renewable energy deployment. So, and in addition to that, I actually think the companies increasingly great to have awareness, and then increasingly that pressure is not just coming from the banking sector, right? So the presentation clearly shows there is no real demand. They are using a lot of the energy. And then if they can make it an energy efficient, let's not say that's purely for the climate change. It actually very critical for their operational efficiency, right? If a big part of your OPEX isn't come from the electricity bill, if you can reduce that, and then clearly you can offer the lower price to your customers. And so that is a real, say, the business and the value and the proposition. At the same time, I do actually see because of their service, they serve such a big amount of corporate and individual consumers, on the end side. A lot of these consumers are actually making net zero commitments as well. They are starting to really looking at, including us, how much we're using, how much electricity we're using on our data center. So there is also that demand from your consumers side, because your carbon footprint has to be part of their scope 3. So that is also some kind of alignment there for them to reduce the carbon emission. Of course, the banks nowadays, if you look at all of these asset management banks, they all making net zero commitment. If I'm going to finance you, I'm going to invest you. I would better know, right? What is your plan to get to the net zero? Otherwise, again, like what I said, there's no chance. But there is also a lot of this pull factor, I think, for this sector, Chauni mentioned, because they're not like an aviation, shipping, technology is not there. For them, technology is really available. they have to deploy. That's also a good thing to see in a lot of their net zero targets. It's not 2050, it's 2030, 2040, right? Much earlier. And then that's also good news for us is because they're deploying now. It's not just a small amount of money go to the R&D, they're actually deploying the money into the huge of energy efficiency, renewable energy, all of this green buildings. That's why you see this the billions amount of the money they need to raise. But we hope we want to see more.
And Faye, I think from your perspective, I think it's interesting to see because you said the bank owns its own data center. So you have that headache of how are you managing that? How are you getting to that stage where you're looking at carbon neutrality when you're looking at your own data centers, but also what are other options there for you?
Yeah, I think what Dr. Jai said in his presentation is very inspiring. It's a double-edged sword. In one hand, we actually see there are beneficials for going digitalizations. So we can see if we go digitalize, we go cloud or using different types of digital solutions, the process actually go much faster. And I just give it put it simple. If in the past we are doing we have to run a program for 10 seconds, now it's 8 seconds. So there's 20% electricity use, less electricity we can use. And this is something a very great enablers for us or for all other companies to achieve their no carbon transition. So this is one side of the story. The other side of the story is because when we are trying to stock takes our own carbon emissions, scope 2, and we found that every other departments or every other branches or buildings, offices, they have actually record a very nice decreasing trend of electricity and carbon usage emissions, but except for digital centers. And when we go to them and ask, oh, hey, you guys, why are you using much more than before? They're saying because of digitalization, they have to increase the numbers of machines, numbers of servers, and that actually leads to a much higher electricity use than before. But the good thing is that if you're talking in terms of intensity, the carbon emission per machine is actually dropping. So we are actually adopting new technologies, better machines, more energy efficient machines in our own operation. So the question here becomes, sometimes if we keep our old data center, there is a limit that whether we can actually how much we can decarbonize ourselves. But if we have to do a much more thorough redesign of our data center, maybe we have to build a new one. And this may be actually much more efficient than the others. So what I observe in the mainland, some banks actually are trying to build their large-scale data center in Inner Mongolia, which actually perfect for what Deborah has said, because it's cooler, it's a very large pieces of land so that they can actually, beside building their own data center, they can build their solar farm or wind farm next to it so that it's got a proximity to the green energy. I don't know about the water side. Don't ask me about that because I have no idea how the water goes in Mongolia. But this is actually somewhere we are trying to do to actually help reducing the carbon emissions in the data center and in our own operations.
Thank you. Yeah, it goes back to location, as Deborah said. It's not just about water, but it's also power, because you need the power where you have the data center, because sometimes you don't have the grid capability of getting it to where you need it. But also it goes back to the technologies, as you were mentioning, Feng. So we've actually been speaking at a few conferences over the last few weeks. And there's now a lot more coverage from the banking side on ICT, and obviously a lot of it is to do with AI, but the recognition that water and potentially power could be a limiting factor. And then there's the talk about, okay, what are the technologies that can actually help this? So from your side, and also maybe China, you can cover this because you mentioned Lenovo, Ant, and Alibaba. What are the technologies that these companies are looking at? Is it just the solar renewables, or are there more things that they're doing?
Right. So I think the first trend what we've seen is even on the solar wind, right? When the company actually say we wanted to reach to the renewable energy 100%, I do encourage you to ask the further questions. What does that mean, the renewable energy in 100%, right? We started to see the trend, right? Some companies simply use the renewable energy in a certificate, right? Just by, that's not relatively easy to do, right? If they isn't available. And then they will put on-site solar wind, right? Then you use all of your rooftops, the backyard, and then corporate PPA. That is already slightly harder, right? Much longer in the commitment. And more importantly is you can actually started to invest in the renewable projects. You started to see these ICT companies, they actually come in and say renewable energy 100%. We also want it 24/7. This data center is not going to run when just the sun shines or wind blows. They run 24/7. So what they wanted to make sure is we actually invest in something. We almost doing this time matching, make sure 24/7 we're on the renewable energy. So that's one trend. I think it's definitely is very good in the direction. Second trend is right. These days the countries regardless what is your energy mix for the data security, all of the countries wanted the data center in their own countries, right? So that is understandable. And then you will start to see for some of these sectors, you go into this country, of course, because you're very big, and you can grab the existing capacity straight away. Nobody can compete with you, but that doesn't really solve much bigger issue, right? There's just a lack of the renewable energy and capacity. We started to see a lot of them started to invest internationally in some newer markets, right? Amazon, I think by now they probably have more than 500 of the solar wind projects. And then they come to this part of Asia, Indonesia and floating solar, that's even a newer technology, but they are the one who is investing. So create that upstream, that build that capacity. Last one I wanted to see, we do started to see the alternative energy in addition to the solar wind. If you go to Singapore, you just don't really have that much of the solar wind. What do? And we started to see some companies, maybe let's try fuel cell power, right? And so that is much smaller site, much higher efficiency. You can probably start to run the natural gas on your fuel cell, almost zero emission and no pollution. Deborah would love to hear this. Is water efficiency extremely high? They don't really need that much water. It is 24/7. So you see some ICT sector starting to collaborate with the fuel cell power generator. Let's put the fuel cell power there. You also see the nuclear, right? I think by 2015, if in Hong Kong, we're looking at decarbonized, nuclear is going to be very big in the energy mix. So some data center or even in the US, a lot of them wanted to build their data center literally next to a nuclear power plant, right? 100% powered by the nuclear power, geothermal. So we started to see this alternative energy coming to play a role as well. Really, the last one is the carbon removal market. I know it's a little bit far from what we talk about in the power, but they are actually very active. Just given the pace where we're going at the moment, I think that we're very slow. Deborah said we're very slow, right? On the graphs to demonstrate that. So we do need the carbon removal technology. It takes a really long time for those projects to actually build. And again, it is the ICT sectors who is actually quite active in the leading role in this area. They launched the multiple of, say, carbon removal buyer and alliance, frontier, and then to commit on this long-term offtake and on these high quality carbon credits in order to get these projects started.
Oh, I don't think I can build any further than what Feng just said, and as well as Dr. Zhai, right? Because he make it very clear what Tencent needs to do to decarbonize, through various levers. So, and I think the choices are fairly clear. But maybe I would just supplement in terms of the models are working together to achieve that. Because if you look at ITC players like Tencent, as well as, Ant, Ali, they really work very closely with their suppliers to achieve it, because you just use Tencent's chart, half of it is come from their supply chain, right? So it's very similar for, their peers. So I think what I have seen in the market is that ICT sectors are working with their suppliers like data centers, as well as renewable energy players, even independent renewable energy providers, to roll out renewable energy, infrastructure, such as rooftop solar that Feng mentioned, right? So I think that's a very unique way of working together to enable your suppliers to decarbonize and also incentivize, renewable energy play to set up on-site solar supply to secure the supply for you together with battery solutions. We have worked with a client in the region doing exactly the same thing in Asia. So I think that's a very interesting model. The second aspect of working collaboration with your supply chain is, going back to the nature-based solution. So I think Ant Forest, for those who use the Alipay, Ali app on a day-to-day basis in mainland China, right? There's the Ant Forest built-in. So every time you use the app to pay your electricity bill, or you walk, you take a bike, you scan the code to get the bike on to go to A to B, you earn almost like carbon credit as you go, right? So through that you build, you contribute to the whole biodiversity plan that Ant actually rolls out. So that's a very clever way of engaging your millions of customers to do it just in a very day-to-day setting. So I think that's something quite interesting.
I'm going to change tack a little bit here. Deborah mentioned the workshop we did, or Sun mentioned the workshop we did earlier this year with banks, talking about this subject. And one thing that came up was how the ICT sector is categorized. Sometimes it's categorized as real estate, it could be as telecom, or it could be infrastructure, and that sometimes complicates how it can be funded in terms of greening it. So, Faye, I'm jumping to you. Looking at regulations, policies, taxonomy, yeah, okay, that's quite a lot, sorry. But what's happening in that space that could actually help push more money and more focus into green ICT?
Well, thanks. First of all, like we all know that Hong Kong actually launched our own taxonomy in early May this year. So although there are like within the four industry that are included, there is no ICT sector. And in fact, if we take a look at internationally, even for country level or the banks level, seldom there is a taxonomy that is actually on ICT sector. So this actually explains some things. But if we think about in the construction industry, actually, if there are different types of green enabling we can use for data center. For example, if you build a new data center, if it actually reach the BIM Plus standards or the other standards that are mentioned in the taxonomy, you can actually classify this as a green node. If it is a renovation, you have to the taxonomy actually requires about 30% of carbon emission reductions to be classified as a green node. Although it's not an easy task, but at least it gives us the clarity in the market to see how we can make the ICT, the data center part, become green or green projects. And I think that can be something more banks can done if we have our own transition taxonomy, which is now which there is no in the market yet. But if that is the case, maybe there are some kinds of if it's 30% is green, I guess there like 20 or 15 will become a threshold for the transition. So this is one thing we have. But the second thing I really want to mention is beyond the buildings, there is a difficulty for banks for justifying whether the project, even it's IT related, is actually a green project, because there is never a calculation or measures on how much carbon is actually saved. For example, take ourselves as an example, we do our own digitalizations, we have our own consultants, and every time they come to us and say, hey, we are doing this very great with a very friendly, environmental friendly projects, I ask them, so what are the benefits you have? They always only can tell me how much paper we saved. never talk about how much electricity you save. But when I try to ask them, so you tell me that your program is like 3 seconds faster than before, then how can you translate it back to the electricity and the carbon emissions? There is never an answer. And I think this is somewhere that the ICT sectors can work on. So you have to tell the banks or tell the others how much electricity you saved before whether we can really classify it as kind of a green or transition projects.
Can I jump in? I know a thing or two about taxonomies. After work on a few of these projects under my HKGFA banner. Faye is absolutely right. You know, not every taxonomy will recognize ICT on a standalone basis, but it's not the reason why we cannot finance it, because, you know, for the things that he just mentioned, right? But there's certainly some taxonomies out there that actually make it very clear in terms of what is eligible for the ICT sector. So if I take EU taxonomy as an example, it actually clarifies ICT as eligible activity under green, and you know, for expenses or activities related to data processing, data driven solutions for GHG emission reduction, broadcasting activities, as long as, you know, they fit with the various EU respective industry standards and meeting the technical thresholds, they are considered as green activities that will enable, you know, banks or investors to come in with their capital supported. So it actually helps if you make it black and white, that is green. Similarly, you know, with the very newly launched Singapore Asia taxonomy, we also see a very clear description of the ICT sector as green activities, right? If you meet the criteria defined, you know, related to that. So I think there's definitely room for improvement for this part of the world.
China, are you putting your name there?
China water risk, maybe. Phase 3 for you guys.
I wanted to open up for questions from the room, and also anybody online, if you want to send any questions through, please do. Any questions?
Yeah. You touch on taxonomy, right? I just wonder what are the panelists' view of the latest Hong Kong taxonomies, you know, coverage of ICT? You think it's already there, or you think it's not that up to speed, or what, you know? So have you looked at that page? Thank you.
So I think I'll take it. Well, I think it's definitely a good progress with the much anticipated Hong Kong taxonomy came live very recently with the 4 sectors that Feng mentioned. Like I said, you know, the absence of ICT right now in the current phase does not mean we cannot finance, you know, this deep decarbonization, right? You do have renewable energy, green buildings, you know, these, you know, energy efficiency elements that we can just draw to put it in the ICT, you know, players as part of their various decarbonization plans. So I think it should not stop us, but certainly it would help, particularly if you look at, you know, the capitalization of the HSI 5, right, as part of total Hang Seng Index. It's very relevant for Hong Kong, very relevant for GBA. So I think it makes sense, you know, for key stakeholders to think about it and provide, you know, constructed recommendations to policymakers, right? I mean, with the current taxonomy, like any version of taxonomy, it's a living document, right? So there's always constant improvement and expansion. You know, it's not just ICT, it's also transition activities that is not part of the taxonomy yet. So there's certainly work to be done.
Love Chinese. Faye, do you have anything else to add there?
Yep. Just echoing what Chinese said. There are always room to improve for taxonomy. So because we cannot have a taxonomy that actually covers all economic activities anyway. And for the ICT sector, what is different is because it is a growing sector, it's a developing. Like 2 years or 3 years ago, we never think about generative AI. And if generative AI can become something green to help the banks or the others to on the sustainable journey. For example, writing their own sustainability report that's actually of the standard of ISSB or the latest other different types of standard. This actually helps the companies a lot for doing their own sustainable development. So what my thing on this point is that we have to the taxonomy has to evolve, and the point is whether it is up to the government or the banks themselves to have their own taxonomy on the ICT sectors. And I think what Deborah said, the first thing we have to do is to spread the word so that if everyone in the market think the ICT sector is important part of the whole green and sustainable finance, then I believe the taxonomies on ICT will eventually emerge, and it's just not just covering the data process part, but maybe also other different type or other different parts of the whole ICT sectors.
Thank you.
Hi, I guess the question I have is, even without a taxonomy, whether it's in your jurisdiction or outside of Hong Kong, what is the, I guess, single or the most common mechanism that you use when issuing debt or bonds or any sort of financial instrument to an entity that is building a data center? So without the taxonomy, do you set any of your own standards for these businesses, whether it be for water use or power use or, you know, closed loop water consumption? You know, what are the banks doing, I guess, under their own steam versus, I guess, the taxonomies that are proliferating across different regions?
Yeah, sure. I don't think taxonomy is the only way to do it, like I mentioned previously, right? And even before the launch of taxonomy, you definitely have seen, you know, banks and investors, you know, deploying their capital to support various decarbonization. So an example would be for the ICT sector, if we look at, you know, let's say a green loan or green bond, right? We definitely look at the deployment of renewable energy because, you know, renewable energy, particularly solar, wind, that's a very clear dark green area for us to have the confidence to invest in. When it comes to energy efficiency, we definitely look at, you know, if a data center, we look at the PUA ratio, we look at, you know, the refrigerant global warming factors, right? So there are lots of these technical metrics that we can draw on to understand the green impact of certain CapEx or OpEx that will bring compared to business as usual. And we also, you know, assess, you know, certain player against, you know, their peers, either locally or internationally, to get a sense of how well, you know, how ambitious, you know, their targets are and their performance, and therefore make a judgment call, you know, to direct our capital when deploying our own balance sheet or structuring a bond deal, you know, to distribute to investors, you know, globally. So these are the typical sort of thinking, you know, behind a deal, even without taxonomy.
If the ICT facilities are implementing these measures as you've prescribed them or suggested, is that attracting a premium or greenium for those instruments? And how much?
Yeah, it depends. You know, for example, the 6.5 billion sustainability linked loan that we did together with, you know, our peers for Ant has a incentive as well as a stick, you know, to it in terms of the margin variation, right? When Ant achieves, you know, the decarbonization target as well as the biodiversity target, agreed among the bank groups, it will get an incentive, and if it fails, it will get, you know, the margin will step up, right? So we do use that kind of financial sort of incentive and carrots and stick approach to help our clients, you know, to speed up that kind of progression. Yeah.
Maybe I just add one point to this, because for us, I think what Shannon mentioned about the sustainability loan is very useful too for ICT sectors, because if for us, most of our most of our financing in the sustainability world is not actually on a project finance. It's general working capitals, and we have to make it linked with sustainability performance target to become a sustainability linked loans. By doing that, we give the flexibility for the companies themselves, so that even they may not actually use that all 100% of the money we provided, we financed it on sustainability projects. They can, if they can still meet the certain the targets that we have set before, they can still qualify, and they get the support, the financial support, like the interest rate reductions and other supports from the banks. And I think this is something very useful and because it gives the flexibility. But on the point of taxonomy, why we stress the importance of taxonomy is because it gives us the clarity, not just for the banks, but also for the markets and for the potential borrowers, that they knows what actually constitute or what banks actually thinks as green or sustainable or transition loans in the market. And this helps actually the markets to grow, to become much more mature, rather than if we do it by like doing every time a bilateral loan using the green bond principles, we use a third party to justify to verify on the environmental benefits. It would become a tailored and case by case basis, which is I do not think it is a good practice for the market in the long term.
I think just very quickly to add is given that everybody has this net zero commitment, right? When you start a new data center, and typically it's energy intensive as well as carbon intensive, you do need to have a plan how you actually plan to get down to the zero, and the more solid of that plan, and then together with your capex, your budget goes with that plan, and then it will be a lot more credible. So here is not just the banks who are evaluating your strategy. A lot of times behind us is our institutional investors are actually looking at your strategy. And then from the quite a few of the sustainability and the debt and the issuers in the market, we do actually see it come out very solid and then oversubscribed. And then you do typically, even for very long dated debt in the 30-year, which we're seeing some ICT in the sector is issuing, right? And then it still gets massive oversubscription and then a bit of greenium there as well.
I have one more question. Thank you very much for your sharing. My question is, like when you mentioned the ICT and particularly certain technology can be an enabler for other sectors to transition, how does this element build into, for example, your mechanism or your transition plan in terms of assessing certain entity or the sector even in terms of its impact, or more something like in the downstream? We talked a lot about upstream impact. What about the downstream? How does that build into your mechanism, or is there a plan, a methodology that's already available? Thank you.
Maybe I just take for a quick answer first, because I think for that question it's sector by sector, because the ICT sector, by going digital, it actually fits into different types of sector. For example, if it's just the property management, you use a building intelligent management system in the whole building, it actually save a lot for the ventilations. Or if you actually renew your the lift system, it actually has a very massive impact on your carbon emissions. And for example, what we see from Dr. Zhai's presentation, he talked about a case in Tencent about the MTR system in Shenzhen. The same things happen, because if you use a lot of intelligence or ICT digital way to monitor the whole operation of your own, you actually save. We can see that you actually can save a lot of electricity, like increase the energy efficiency, and eventually you cut the carbon emissions. So, in a nutshell, it's a case by case basis, but as we said, you have to have your own transition plan, and your transition plans should actually embed those ICT elements within the plan, so that as a financer or investors, we can actually see it or assess it to evaluate whether these plans are actually solid or not.
So the personal view here, I think that's a very good question. 2 points. One is, yes, you can be an enabler, but that should not be a reason not to reduce your own operation, carbon footprint, right? As we can see in let's say in the solar panel, basically pretty much all of the clean energy and equipment, we couldn't claim the world really needs it and it needs a lot of it, but that should not become a reason not to reduce the carbon intensity of producing all of this equipment and ultimately get to the net zero. Second point is, yes, for all of these enablers, if you think about it, your product and the services enable the downstream to reduce the emission, but that reduction does not show up in any of your scope 1, 2, 3. I guess that's where your question actually comes in. So some of this technology enablers do get together, started to think about can we have instead of GHG in inventory accounting, can we have GHG in impact accounting? So you started to see some technology in the companies that when they make a target or transition plan, they have a plan for their own operation. They also have a plan saying how my products are going to helping the other sectors to avoid emission. I wanted to hit both of these targets. I think that's also the important message to give to investors, financiers, so they don't give unnecessary punishment to these companies just because their products is really in high demand. They have to produce a lot, and then they cannot immediately reduce their scope 1, 2, 3. But there's no any other supplement the matrix to see. Or actually, they're actually doing some great contribution. So that's the 2 points that I make.
Thank you very much for those questions. I just have one final question because we only have a few minutes left, which is let's end positive. Tell me something that you're excited about in this space.
Okay. I'm very positive about this sector for 3 reasons. One is they are really innovative. I love this sectors is because they don't think linearly. Right? They have a first-hand experience of this exponential growth. That's why I actually see them super active in a lot of this newer technology, right? They come in. That's number 1. Number 2, right? You can have a very good vision, but if you don't have resources, nothing's going to happen. I love this sector because they are very profitable. They have a capital, so they can invest in all of these areas. Then the third one is Chaoni actually mentioned on this is on this supply chain. They do actually have this leadership role of collaborating on creating that ecosystem, bringing in all of their suppliers, which is a lot of times is much smaller players, right, on their own. They don't really have that access to the capital, to the latest technology, but going together with this big companies, they have that access. So now I'm very positive and seeing some great examples of that fostering the ecosystem to tackle this together.
I look at this question in a much longer angle. We all understand from history perspective, computing power grows exponentially. So it just grows much faster. And the use of energy is actually growing much less fast. So one day, sooner or later, we will actually have a day that the growing of computing power that can help us save more electricity than the growth of electricity of using ICT like computing powers. So one day, I believe ICT will become a negative carbon emission sectors. And this is why we are all very focused and very emphasized on this part.
Well, can't top that. It's too bullish. Maybe I'll go a bit bearish. Just taking the water findings, I think it's very under the radar for a lot of ICT players, right? So I think water is very patchy. I think you definitely have seen very leading like front runners like Microsoft and Alphabet, with their wastewater, way to replenish, kind of goals and plans, right? We don't see that so much, in this part of the world yet, right? So I think, our ICT companies in Asia need to address, the water product circularity, this kind of aspect, in addition to decarbonization. I think that it's a complex, road, and it's not as rosy as we would think. Certainly, it's a very profitable sector. It's so penetrated in our day-to-day, and I think that's a good thing as well, because it's so in our day-to-day. So they engage with consumers, with customers so well. You cannot go to China without an app, without your phone, right? So in a way, I think the close connectivity also helps, us to, maybe we are in the driver's seat to decarbonize their footprint. I deleted 400 pictures of my baby before coming to this event, right? So I think there are many cats and dogs and food photos that many people can delete.
Yeah. All right, thank you very much. I think we've had an amazing discussion. Thank you again for the three of you for agreeing to speak today. When we released this report, our first report last September, we did not think we would have the engagement and the momentum that we have been able to achieve in the last few months. It's been absolutely brilliant. But there's clearly a lot that needs to be done, because we need to get to the stage where IT becomes a negative carbon, whatever you said, but negative. But we have to make sure that power and water doesn't constrain that until it gets to that point. So what we would love to see actually from the financial sector is, one, more transition finance, because without that, we're going to run out of water in the places that we need it. Two, we would love to see more financial products that also include water, because we need power to clean water, to move it. And currently, we're not thinking about water when we think of green finance. And third, we would love to see more on adaptation finance. And that's completely lagging. But we need to protect all of these data centers, the real estate, the infrastructure, everything from the storm surges and the floods and the sea level rise that are coming through and are going to only get much worse. So those are the three things that we would love to see. We have a much longer list, but I'm going to end up with three. But thank you, and please, can we have a round of applause for our great speakers?
Deb wants to say something, but I'm not going to let her. She can.
Another ask, but No, I want to echo Chownie. I think we are actually working with some of these global ICT companies to help them achieve their water neutrality strategies in Asia. I would like to sort of see some Asian companies be there as well. So that's not an ask for the banking sector. That's just a broad ask for any ICT company out there that's from Asia. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you all for the panelists. We're very lucky to have your very brilliant minds with us today. So thank you, Feng, Fei, Chani, and Darisha. Sounds like we are maybe looking at another ICT taxonomy working group. I'm not going to ask Florence because she's busy. And anyone who wants to take it off Chownie's hands, she will buy drinks for the whole group for a month. So anyway, finally, just thank you all for joining. It's been a real pleasure for you to have us join us today, and to the 350 plus people who are joining online. Thank you again. Finally, for those with CPT, remember to please scan in and you know what to do. Finally, also one last thing is our biodiversity training series that is on June the 12th, and it is Friday Eve, so we will deserve a drink. Let's go. Thank you very much.